Booktube. This is Kelly. Thank you so much for watching Books I'm Not Reading. It's Tag Tuesday, and I am on a mission to get caught up with tags that I didn't even know I had been tagged in. So my apologies that some of these are coming so late. This is the literary fiction book tag, which was created by the lovely Jasmine at Jasmine's Read, and I was tagged by Claire Reads Books. Claire, thank you so much for tagging me in this, and I'm so sorry that it's taken me so long to freaking get there. I will link to both of their versions of this tag down below. I have to say, Jasmine, I found this a pretty difficult tag. Question number 1 is, how do you define literary fiction? Now, I used to work in a bookstore, and of course there were sections divided off that you could say by genre. So there was fiction, mystery, romance, westerns, and science fiction and fantasy. But I would say within all of those sections, there would be books that I would consider literary fiction, but they had just been kind of, I don't know, relegated to the genre category. But I think literary fiction for me just implies maybe a like a higher standard of writing. I just expect more from it than I do from genre. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with genre fiction. Please don't think I'm saying that. I tend to think of genre fiction as something that I might read on vacation, or it comes in a mass market paperback, but that's of course not true. Like, lots of things that are literary fiction have been published in mass market paperback. So anyway, it's really tricky to define just by like eliminating those genre sections and saying that the only thing that's really literary fiction is what's left in the fiction section, because I think there are some great books out there that, again, like I said, have ended up in genre. All right, so question number 2. Name a literary fiction novel with a brilliant character study. And one of the things, I forgot to say this, I really want to do with this tag is not talk to you about the same books that I always talk to you guys about. So try to really dig deep and find some things that I haven't talked to you, that I love, but I haven't talked to you about on this channel. So for this character study question, I wanted to tell you about Daughter of Earth by Agnes Smedley. Now, I read this book in college in a women's studies class. It is published by a feminist press. And I bought it for Jason, and I'm pretty sure this is the edition that I bought for Jason, because it definitely does not feel like it's ever been read. I have read it though. This is a biographical, I mean, it's a novel, but it's really has a lot to do with her own life story of growing up, I believe, in northern Missouri. She was born in the 1890s, I want to say. And her family is extremely poor. Extremely poor. So just about their experience and how she kind of rises up out of that situation and changes her own circumstances, but never forgets where she comes from. So it's a really, really powerful book that you've probably never heard of, but it is excellent. Question number 3. Name a literary fiction novel that has experimental or unique writing. So for this, I'm going to go with On the Road by Jack Kerouac. This is almost like a stream of consciousness novel. I love it. I know that not everyone is a fan, but I do really, really love this book. And I know there's some other great stream of consciousness novels. I'm thinking there's one by Virginia Woolf. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But that's just a different form of writing. I think it takes kind of a different mentality going into it, knowing that that's what it's going to be like. Let's see. Number 4, name a literary fiction novel with an interesting structure. So I don't actually own this book, and so I don't have it here. I made my local library buy it, and like libraries across the country, cataloging that book is a nightmare because of its structure. So it's a book, and there's a story in the, so there's a novel, okay? But there's also the mystery of who wrote it. And there's these 2, I think, graduate students who start writing each other notes in the sections of the book. And in addition to that, there's also what I would call ephemera in the books. So it might be an envelope with something in it. It might be, oh my gosh, a postcard. All these different things. And I do think the ephemera is supposed to come at a very specific time in the book. And so when you check it out to people, obviously it's probably not gonna, I could see some of that stuff in a library easily disappearing forever. And also, never really knowing the order of, are you finding the ephemera at the right moment? So it's a very, very strange book, and I really I struggled a bit to read it because I was like, do I read the novel? Do I read the notes from the graduate students? What am I trying to, how am I supposed to read this book, I guess? Anyway, it's a very interesting structure. All right, number 5, name a literary fiction novel that explores social themes. And the next one is name a literary fiction novel that explores the human condition. I really struggled with both of these questions because I feel like there's so many books that do this. Social themes. You could argue for all of Jane Austen. Both of them. You could argue for Dickens for either of those. And I realize those are we would say those were classics, not literary fiction. But I also don't believe that literary fiction just has to be something that's recent. So anyway, so I've got another Penguin classic here for a novel that explores social themes. That is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell, a Victorian writer. And this is about just vignettes in a small town. I read a biography of Elizabeth Gaskell at the end of 2019, and so it was interesting, how much of this was based on where she grew up or where she spent a lot of her time as a young girl, and so anyway, but definitely about class and that sort of thing. So number 6 is a name. A book that, a literary fiction book that explores the human condition. This is one I just recently read. This is Gourmet Rhapsody by Muriel Barbary. And so this book is essentially, it's about a food critic who has been told he has 48 hours to live. And there's a flavor that he is searching for, and he cannot figure out what it is. And that is what all of the chapters that are from his perspective, that's all he is thinking about. And the rest of the chapters are about all the people in his life, or that he's just even maybe just had a tiny, tiny bit of contact with, what they think of him. And there's a whole spectrum. Some people are like, die. Number 7, name a brilliant literary hybrid genre novel. This one I picked. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Can you believe I've read this book? Oh my god, it's so huge. But we bought it. I'm sure we bought it new, even though eventually it ended up in bargain. And But nonetheless, so I have read this book, and it is a mix between historical fiction and fantasy. And it's brilliant. Like, it is an amazing book. There is one scene in this novel that I will never forget. Every time I look at it, that is instantly what comes to my mind. I can hear the sounds in the back. So yeah, it's, if you're not familiar with it, let's see if I can find a really abbreviated, it's about so both of these characters are magicians, essentially, and one of them starts playing with the wrong kind of magic, sort of thing. So anyway, it's a great book. A chunker for sure. Question number 8. What genre do you wish was mixed with literary fiction more? And I would argue all of them. But I also just, again, want to say, like, there isn't anything wrong with genre fiction. I love genre fiction. I just don't read a whole lot of it. But for a vacation or, I don't know. Yeah, it's just, there's always going to be that borderline. And I think there are some things that get relegated to being genre fiction that are actually literary fiction. So I would encourage all of you to, if you're looking for literary fiction of a particular genre, to start at the beginning of that genre. How did that genre begin? One of my favorite books is Owen Wister's The Virginian, and I would argue that this is the beginning of Westerns. So if you really like Westerns and you want something that's maybe a little bit more literary, like, this is a great place to start. All right. Wow. What a challenging tag that was. So I am so sorry I don't have people to tag for this. If you would like to do this tag, please go for it, and make sure to let me know so that I can see your answers or your responses to these really tough questions. Thank you so much again to Jasmine for creating this tag, and for Claire for tagging me. Remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will talk to you very soon, BookTube. Take care.